That's a familiar song. Hey everybody, it's Robert Ohotto, and welcome to episode 3 of Your Intuitive Edge. What decisions are far too big for you to make with your mind? What decisions can you make with your mind? What decisions you could maybe make with your mind if your mind was more informed? What could more inform your mind to make those decisions? What decisions do you just need to flat out leave and let your intuition take over and take care of, and let your mind know what to do? We are covering all of that in tonight's show. This is what choices are too big to make with your mind. So we're going to cover so many different angles, and I'm going to give you such great, I think, pointers on how to make some decisions. So as we begin tonight, one of the things I really want you to do is think about 3 decisions. So I've got 3 categories for you. I want you to think of a decision that isn't a big decision. It's just kind of it's a decision you got to make maybe, but it's not like big. Like, am I getting married? Am I moving to another town? Am I going back to school big, or having a baby big? This is just pick out a decision that you've got to make, and you haven't made it yet. You're thinking about it, all right? And then I want you to pick out a medium-sized decision. Like, what decision might you have in your life right now that's not tectonic, but it's got more meat on the bone. It's not quite as small as like an everyday decision that you haven't quite made yet, but you're kind of mulling around. So get that on deck, and get your papers and pens out, because we going to school. And I want you to write these down. So small decision, medium decision, and then I want you to think of a very massive decision that you've been sitting on, mulling around, thinking about, and you haven't made it yet. And we're going to go to town. I want you to bring those decisions to this show, and let's do this. So I'm inspired by this show, inspired to do this show, is because I think it's something that even I sometimes have to ask myself, that decision is far too big for me to make with my mind. So I want to show you a process of how you can kind of shift out of just pinning decisions on the mind and let yourself become more informed, so something greater can help sort of scoot you into the choice that's optimal for you. So as we begin, I want to say, I don't really, and it sounds cliche to say this, but I don't really believe there are right or wrong choices. I think we learn either way. But I do also believe that there are optimal choices. So we can make optimal choices out of being very informed, but information's tricky. What kind of information are we running our decisions on? Where are we getting that information from in ourselves and from the environment? That's where we're going to dive in. So, got your decisions ready for tonight's show. Got your small one, medium one, big one. And I want you to think now, what would be needed for optimal decision making? Just looking at decisions and making choices every day in your life. What do you think would be needed for optimal decision making? For you to make decisions in by optimal, I mean, all things considered. And that's the key word, considered. This is the best choice in the now. This is the best choice based on the data I've got. This is the best choice based on what my capacity of perception allows me to see. That's another key thing we're going to come back to, capacity of perception. But what do you need to make good decisions? Well, you need information. I mean, straight up, you need information. You need information to make choices, do we not? So we in the United States just went through an election cycle that's still lingering on. And when I went to vote on my ballot, I had to research candidates and get more information and feel them through. And for me, this was a great example of a decision that was too big to just make with my mind. Because I know that who I vote for sets a karma in motion that then goes out into the world in a certain way and returns to me, into my system in a certain way. So when it comes to decisions, let's also track something here. A lot of times we don't make them because we understand that truth of karma, that whatever decision we make, it is absolutely going to thread into a karmic choice consequence dynamic in our lives. So keep that in mind. I'm going to be doing some riffing around here and laying some things holographically out for you. And then I'm going to kind of pull it together and kind of do a decision-making system toward the end. But for now, just remember, you need to have information to make well-informed, optimal decisions. Now, that's a tricky territory because while we need information, and I would say the more the better, the more information the better, you still need to understand the quality of information you're getting to make decisions as well. So as we look at the complexities of karma, which is very complex, I mean, karma basically, as I want to language it for this particular show, is about choice and consequence, action and consequence. So it's just a neutral law. It's sort of a universal law that actions and choices thread into consequences. And let me just give you an image of choice and how it works within the holographic field. You make a decision, and you make it based on many things we're going to cover shortly here, but you make a decision, and then that decision pulses out into the greater grid of life. It goes out into the field, the holographic field. Now, once it's out, once your decision's made, once you have chosen to zig or zag, that is going to go out into the world, and then that choice and its energy gets influenced and informed by the forces, the other karmic forces alive and well in the world. So it's like shooting an arrow, but there's winds out there, there's birds, there's things in the air that are going to cause, and gravity, it's going to cause that arrow's direction to shift a bit. Your choices are no different. So I think there's an intuitive part of us in our gut that we know. In some ways, one could say there are no small choices because all of this starts to push out into the world and come back to you in a consequence for your life. And that's not right, wrong, good, or bad. It's just a technical karmic truth. So as we enter into decision-making and choices, and the choices that really are too big to leave to your mind, I want you to start thinking about choice itself. I want you to start thinking about that like a karmic technician. So I want to lay down now that we make choices, they go out into the world, and the world influences outcomes in ways that we really have no power over. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Most of the time, once you've let that choice go out of your field into the world and start to line up a different flowchart of possibilities in your destiny, that choice is made and the karma's set and things are moving. And then there's things affecting that you might not have any power over. Now, you have to understand on some level the complexities of karma in that regard. You know, there are just karmic forces that even on your best intuitive day, you're not going to track. But it is optimal to track as many as you can. It is optimal to get as much data and information as you can on any given choice. So if we just stay in the territory of the mind and what it does in making decisions, this is where you would do research. You would, investigate, get as much information on the ground level of choice making as you can. So if that's buying a new home, for example, you're going to want to research the neighborhood. You're going to want to research the real estate market, how homes are selling in that area, and what the property taxes are, what the loan rates are as far as mortgages go. That's the kind of stuff the mind can do. This is some sort of name, if you will, and extrapolate for yourself what I'm saying here into these decisions I've had you pull into this show. But I'm starting to name the territory of, hey, there are decisions with your mind you can pretty easily make. And they can be made with just basic ground level research. So you get on the ground level, you start doing your research, and we're in the territory of the mind. Now, one of the things we're always going to ask in making a decision, in any decision we make, we're going to ask, hey, what will the outcome be if I make this decision? So we become anticipatory of the karma. We become, and who will it affect? And how will that affect me? And that's absolutely appropriate. When you're making decisions, you want to be like, well, what's going to happen here? Where is this going to go? Where might this take me? Okay. Now, in buying a home, example I just used, you can kind of deduce a pretty solid karmic outcome. But once again, you could have a hurricane sweep through your town. You could have an earthquake. You could have a wildfire. And these are very real realities for people now, all the time. So I would personally myself in buying a home, one of the things I would consider is, hey, what will climate change do in 10 years from now in this area that I'm thinking of buying a home? Is this a climate change danger zone or not? Now, this is going to bring us into, I think, something very important to understand about choice and perception. What if I denied climate change was real? That data or that perspective around home buying would never even enter my consciousness in the decision-making process. I would never even consider that, hey, this could be on a floodplain. This could be in a wildfire zone. This could be in an earthquake zone. This could be on the coast where the sea levels will rise and tsunamis are coming as the earth crust shifts and things just... So, one thing I want you to grab onto right now, having said that, is what is your bandwidth of perception and what determines that when it comes to getting data to make choices? What do you actually allow into your peripheral view? What blocks things and data from getting in? Hold that thought because we're going there in a minute. One of the things I want to introduce you to, though, as we continue laying out the framework here for optimal decision making, is I've found that those that really have an anchor into their core values are the most decisive when it comes to making decisions, and they always seem to make decisions that they feel no matter what the karma, they're cool with it because they're in their values. So one of the things that has to be brought into the fold of decision making, whether that's with the mind or I'm going to go bigger and go holographic into your intuitive system shortly, is what do your values say when it comes to making certain decisions? Now, it's very interesting and very telling because you'll see people tell you what their values are all the time, and then you'll watch them choose something completely opposite of what those values that they claim to possess are. Is that you? And then what is your capacity to hold the fort with those values when the stakes get higher and the pressures get more intense on decision making in your life? So hold those thoughts. I'm laying the holographic coordinates out here. Now, what you want out of whether it's research on the ground level, whether it's, let's say, understanding the complexities of karma and really considering how the choice will impact and fractal out and come back to you in some way, whether that's sort of forecasting, anticipating future outcomes and future patterns, you want useful data. Because you can get a lot of information about any decisions you have, but it won't be useful. So let's say you're starting to date somebody and you're trying to evaluate, hey, is this the person that is worthy of my time, going to help me go the distance, help me in the long run, really become what I was born to become, and am I going to serve their evolution? Are we going to be in this together? Is this something I can really commit to? Well, there's the useful information is found in spending time with that person and discovering them. There's also useful information in watching their congruency to their values or lack thereof. There's also useful information in terms of asking just straight up questions and seeing and feeling them in the answer. Feeling whether or not they're lying to you, feeling whether they're being forthright or telling the truth. You can feel that. Of course you can. What isn't useful would be you projecting onto them information that they're not generating back to you. So if you've already made them, your husband or wife or spouse or partner for life, and that's the data you've projected based on an image versus essence, you're not getting useful information. You are actually delivering yourself a projection and calling it information, and it's bunk. And you will not make informed decisions step by step in the dating process that allow you to unfold into possibly a beautiful marriage or long-term commitment. So here's one other vein here of how this works. So information matters, yes, lots of it, the more the merrier, but you want the right info. You don't want the fake version that you either generate or that someone else generates and wants you to see, et cetera, et cetera. So hold that thought. I'm trying to bounce around to also sectors where we make decisions, relationships, buying a house, taking a job. Think about the bigger decisions, having children, relocating, maybe ending a relationship, ending a marriage. That's a massive decision too. So beginnings and endings, and building and tearing down, and all these things that become part of our choice-making journey as human beings. Now, here's the thing. When it comes to useful information, your values can inform that, but your values could also be conditioned values. Maybe they're not even really your values. Do you even know? Are these values that were handed down by your culture or parents, but you're not even sure if they're what you value? So values aren't always the best source of information. It can go either way. Unless you've done some deep inner work and connected to something beyond your cultural and socio-cultural conditioning and familial wounding, do you even know what you value? And how do you know that it's a true value for you? How do you know that? How do you know you can count on the information and the gut instinct your values are kind of kicking in? Now, obviously I have an end game here, and it's to get you into your soul and start to look at soul values and mystical values, if you will, because you'll never go wrong with those. Those will always be on point. But to get to that territory and, let's say, a more expanded bandwidth of information, you can't do that with the mind. This is where the mind's going to go, I can't do that. Now, I've got to say something here. It's really important. We live in well, first of all, what is the mind? What is it? What is the mind? For me, I would say the mind is this part of your psyche that processes information. It sees reality through your eyes or your five senses, right? You're getting information and data to this, and there's nothing right or wrong about the mind. It's like a piece of hardware, right? But this hardware is also connected to software, and that software is just like I named just a minute ago, the socio-cultural conditioning or trauma and your patterns that adapted to that trauma. All of that is also informing your perception all the time. And there's nothing right or wrong about that. It's just what it means to be human. But back to decisions. I'm sure many of you are watching this show because you want to make sure you don't make decisions that repeat your history, that repeat your past, that take you back into a painful experience or replicate your childhood all over again, just with different players. But if you got to the main, alchemical storyline and sort of alchemize everything down to the essences, you'd realize, you know what? I'm doing the same stuff that my parents did in their marriage, that my grandparents did with their money. You start to realize I'm running on software, informing my hardware of my mind. And I am making decisions that just keep replicating fate and do not open into destiny. So I know a lot of you, and that's a question to live in. Am I doing that? And that's something I would have you ask yourself as you consider a decision. Am I doing that as I make this decision? Am I replicating the same old same that my parents handed down to me? And I thought it was different, but if I get real, it's really not at all. And I've watched people try to trick themselves into this idea that they're actually on a new groove without having done any inner feng shui. Like they just want to hop, skip, and jump. And the way that they often do that is they think, and this is culturally supported, they think if they just change their thoughts, they'll change their life. I'm calling bullshit. You change your patterns, you change your life. Your thoughts don't change your life. Your patterns do. Your patterns, in fact, generate how you think. So my point on this is that this culture has given a false power to the mind. And you might even look to your bookshelf to see all the books that you've bought in the past about the power of the mind. I'd have you go investigate those and go, wow, is this really true? If I just think positively, does that actually change my life? Does that actually heal trauma? Does it actually re-feng shui my interior to a different flow of possibilities? Or is it just a cover story that I use to defend the wounds? And then in doing so, I keep them alive. And then it's the alive wound that's informing your decisions. And this is where we replicate our history again and again and again. So I want you to know that there are huge limits of perception within your mental field. And you must understand there's a cultural confusion around how powerful the mind is. And I want to help you clear that up so that you're not making decisions from the mental field alone. It has its place. The mind absolutely has its place in your, let's say, configuration of power. And certainly decision making. It is the mind that eventually executes a decision. Even if your greater intuitive system is really making the decision, it still has to come through the mental field in the end game. But don't mistake the caboose for the engine when it comes to making decisions and your power and your capacity to change your life. Now, I want you to understand another element of this false power of the mind, a more specific thread out of that, and that is the mind is given a false power of perception, period. Most people think that whatever they see with the mind, the ego mind, is where the power is. Now, hey, if I'm in a room or if I'm looking at a home I'm going to buy, I'm going to want to look in every room and just use my eyes and my senses to feel the vibe. Like, okay, is this house falling apart? Is it pretty sturdy? Does it have defensible space if in case there is a wildfire? Can you tell I live in Colorado? Is it on? Is that stream over there going to eventually flood into my house someday if there's too much rain? Use your eyes. Absolutely. Your mind can do this. But can your mind tell you, you know what, in 5 years there is going to be a massive flood? Maybe you don't want to buy this home. No, your mind is not telling you that. Can your mind tell you that, though you just met this person, you started dating, it's a little bumpy, once you get past the rapids, you're going to have the most amazing relationship ever. You're just working out some kinks. No, your mind can't tell you that. But something else can. Your heart, your intuition, that can. So you have to understand what the mind cannot see and not buy into this idea that it has this massive power of perception. It does not. And I'm only saying things that you already know are true because you're living it. How many times have you, based on what you saw, made a decision only to find that behind what was visible was some completely other database of information that had you been able to see that, you would have made a completely different decision. And that goes either way. Sometimes we miss out on opportunities, and sometimes we go into opportunities and make decisions to avail ourselves to situations that really are not in our best interest. So, 2 points here I want to recap. There is a false power given to the mind by this culture. It's what we would call a logos culture. We mentalize everything, and we do that because we think that if we do that, it becomes more controllable. So if everything in my life can be changed just by me changing to positive thoughts, well, then I feel like I have some control now over my health, over my reality, over who I quote unquote attract into my life. But I'm here to tell you that's actually, it's all BS. It's not true. And you know it because you've lived this. I'm not telling you something your system hasn't already had an experience of. So in addition to false power of the mind, there's a sense of the false perception that it can give you. It cannot see things. It can see only a certain bandwidth out. It doesn't see a certain spectrum of information. You got to rely, in fact, on what's behind the five senses for that. So one thing I want to do as we pivot off the mind toward intuition next, of course, this is your intuitive edge, is I want to map a little bit of the human psyche so you can understand the laws of the human psyche and the role the mind plays within your human psyche. The mind in this regard would be the conscious waking ego. It is the ego you that perceives reality. You're seeing me right now with it in some way. It is, in that regard, in our waking daily life, the main seat of perception. We see from our egocentric point of view. And that's not right or wrong, it's just human. But it has vulnerabilities and it has massive limitations. So I want to ask you a question here. Take a step back with all this information I've already laid down. How do you see reality? How do you perceive reality? Take a minute with that. How do you see things? What part of you sees what? How do you know what part of you is seeing what? How big does your mental ego mind and its bandwidth go? Where can you tell, like, over here's a blind side. Over here's a blind side. I can't see that far that way. My ego mind's head can't tilt that direction. Okay. Now I'm going to help you define this even more. I want you to think about how you perceive reality, and I want to offer that perception itself is tricky business because it occurs in the mental field of our human ego. I'm speaking. The mind. Your mind perceives via biases, via filters, which are similar to biases. Biases sort of lean you toward information and stuff in a certain way. Filters tend to filter out information or can filter the way you see it. And that's where bias becomes a filter. Sociocultural conditioning informs greatly what you see or don't see. So adding into this, and this will take us to another level of the human psyche, you also will oftentimes see through your history, not the present moment. Now, there's a reason why that happens. And it's oftentimes our history that generates the bias, that generates the filter, that generates the limited bandwidth from which we're seeing. So what does it mean to see from your history? It means that, I've told the story a million times, but whatever. It's just so good. I'm going to forever tell it. I was in South Dakota. So if you know the story, oops. I'll try to put an extra twist in, I guess. But I was in South Dakota teaching an event years and years and years ago, and I have a beautiful, loving black lab. And me and my team that helped me produce the event were coming around the corner on this hike with my dog off leash, because it is nature, it's the wild. And we noticed there were 3 women coming toward us. And as soon as one of them saw my dog, she went into hysteria. She literally clammed up like this. And at first, I truly thought she was kidding, because my dog is the kind of dog that is just a lover. He's got the lover archetype, baby. That dog come lick you and make you happy. And if he thinks you're sad, he's going to come in some more for a snuggle huggle. And huggle is like a huddle cuddle. I just made that up. Huddle snuggle. Anyway, he's awesome. And he is so not aggressive at all. But what she saw wasn't this beautiful, loving black lab in front of her. What she saw was something that happened to her as I was intuiting it in real time, around 5 or 6 years old, where a dog actually scared her, traumatized her, and bit her. So whenever she sees a dog, it probably could have been a Chihuahua, honestly, and she would have seen the same thing, a vicious dog coming at her as a little girl. And I almost felt like I was watching her shapeshift into this little child in front of me the whole time this encounter is happening. And then once I realized, I could see tears coming down her face, that she wasn't seeing the loving black lab, she was seeing from her history. Then I reined my dog in. And here's my dog, of course, she's freaking out. My dog's moving in to comfort her, and it's freaking her out more. It was just, oh man. But my point is, we are all her. We are all her in our own way. So when you start to look at, back to decisions, the thread of the show, when you start to look at making decisions, can you even make them? Or do they just become compulsive, reactionary? Like, she didn't make a decision. I watched her whole system do this thing in front of me, and there was no conscious choice involved. None. And that brings us to, how much conscious choice do you have in decisions? Now, little sidebar. But back to the subject of this show, which is conscious choices. When are you seeing through your history information that's historical and you're mistaking it for present data, just like this woman did right in front of me. What does that look like for you? Any of those choices you just picked out for this show, you're going to go back and evaluate them. And you're going to go, you know what? First of all, am I even in present time with these decisions? Am I in present time data gathering? Now, I don't ever want you to judge yourself for how your system is adapted to trauma or to shame or to things that happened to you in your past. Don't ever judge that. Those are the parts of us we just want to love and hug all the more. But I do want you as a spiritually mature adult to go, okay, I'm going to hug this, and at the same time, I am going to remove this from the decision table, my round table of power, where I have different parts of my power sitting here to help me make optimal choices. This part of me that's historical, traumatized, and can't see in present time doesn't get a seat at that table, or if it does get a seat, it doesn't get a vote on the choice at hand. Maybe that's a better way to say it. I never want to exclude any parts of you. I'm just saying I wouldn't rely on that part of you for useful information. Yeah, I take it back. It definitely gets to stay at the table. We want to keep everything gets to be here. But I'm just using this example to say, look, you don't want your history there in a way that's not connected to present time. Now, is there a history that can be useful? Yes. If, for example, you start dating somebody or whatever, you start to form a relationship, and in the past you have been cheated on or betrayed, or you found that the dating process got shaky, and someone just kind of misrepresented themselves to you, and you didn't listen to the red flags. Maybe you didn't even see them because your perceptual bandwidth was shut down so much. You want to use that experience at this new table of choice, because that is the information that's useful. Okay, what do I need to check in with? And this is how it's useful. What do I need to check in with so that I am, in fact, not denying red flags, not speculating and thinking that's real data, not projecting and thinking that's real data? But that's a different approach than letting your traumatic responses and adapted strategies make decisions for you. That is the healing response. That's the healing pivot to choice. The other one is the victimization, staying in the victim loop way to stay with choice. Hold that thought. Now, come back to the fact that I am mapping the human psyche here. And what I'm after here in this historical context of information influencing you in decision making is I'm after the power, in fact, of your subconscious mind and how it handles information. So it's important to understand that you have this sort of computer data bank of memory in your psyche as a human being that makes decisions for you every single day. It's making them for you right now. It's deciding to digest your food. You're not sitting there consciously going, it's time to digest. It's time to breathe. It's time to pump blood. No, your subconscious has got that down. It also has down all the other things you've ever been through in terms of your traumatic experiences. And it's made decisions when those happened on how to best protect you. The thing is, it creates a software that just keeps going on until you intervene and overwrite it. So you have to be aware of my point is, and that's a whole nother show, but you have to be aware of this in decision making. You want to touch base with, all right, where's my history? Where's my software that I developed out of my history? Where's it at in this decision making process? And don't make it wrong, just get a coordinate on it. Get a coordinate on it. Then I want to go a little deeper into you and say that beyond the subconscious mind is the human shadow. This is where we oftentimes store the traumatic experiences, store our shame. How many of you started diets and you thought you were doing it out of a New Year's resolution, but if I were to read you, I'd look at you and go, actually, your shame started that diet. And I can guarantee you can lose some weight, but you're going to gain it right back. Why? Because the whole time you're dieting, all you're actually telling yourself is, I'm not good enough as I am. That's why I need to diet. And that's what the subconscious mind takes in. And then you lose the weight, that program's still running the reality. And before long, you'll eat again to deal with everything because you didn't refeng shui. You got to overwrite software. You got to refeng shui the psyche. You got to get new patterns in yourself managing your safety, security, esteem, and survival, or you will just keep looping. It's a technical karmic thing. So the shadow work you do puts you in touch with the parts of yourself beneath the surface that are actually doing all the decision making already. They're helping you choose what you wear, who your friends are, your values. So I just want to get you a sense. I want you to get a holographic sense of your psyche. You've got your ego mind. And now get a sense of how powerless it actually is to these other things I just named. And now let's talk about what decisions can it make that you can kind of rest easy with. Let's see, I'm out of food. I need to go to the grocery store. Go for it. Use your mind. Done. Moving on. I'm tired. I need to go to sleep. Use your mind. Make a decision to go to sleep. Done. I'm a bit stinky. I need a shower or a bath. Okay, done. Easy peasy. Go for it. Your mind can handle these decisions. These more pedestrian, daily, routine decisions. Now, should I get married to this person? Ooh, I wouldn't do that with your mind. Is it time to have a baby? Ooh, I wouldn't do that with your mind. Should I buy this house? Nah, I would wait on that. Let's full stop. Too big for the mind. How about this? I've got a broken arm. I got to get surgery. I think that's something you can pretty much do with your mind, but also it kind of tips in and out of the mind because now we're in the territory of, okay, who's the best surgeon? I've got to feel that out. I've got to do ground level research, but my gut's got to kick in. This is surgery. I could die. People die in surgery. So my point is, you've got the easy peasy decisions of the day. And I don't know if your small decision that you picked out was one of those ones that you could just kind of look at the basic read and your history's probably not going to get all up in it. Your subconscious and your shadow are going to be pretty neutralized as you look at the data. It's all good. You got this. When you get into different territory, well, the dynamics shift and the information needed changes as well. And this is where I would say, don't make that with your mind. No way, girlfriend, boyfriend. Come back. We got to find another way here. Now, of course, per the title of my show, the other way is your intuition. But let's talk about intuition for a minute here, shall we? Now, I'm going to take a little break, get a drink of ginger ale before we go into intuition. If you want to participate in the live chat for this particular live stream, you need to go to Crowdcast. I've put links both on Facebook and YouTube Live for you to do that. Just go there, sign up, get on in. It's free. But I'm going to see what you guys are all saying. Hey, everybody, give me some shout outs while I take a drink. Hi from Australia. I got people from everywhere here. I love it. I love it. What's great, thank you all for showing up. It's really fun to be here with all of you. Lots of people here tonight. So, woohoo! Let's pivot to intuition. There are so many ways. I was thinking about this before the show. There's so many ways I could talk about intuition, and I'll be talking about it in various different ways, show to show to show. So, it's going to be fun doing these shows ongoing because every show will be a different angle on intuition and your intuitive edge. And what I mean by your intuitive edge, I mean having this sort of edge on decision making, on feeling your way through life, on really opening yourself into optimal potential. I think in my experience, with people that I've worked with, whether it's Fortune 500 companies or people that are high voltage creatives in Hollywood or just common people running businesses and having their daily lives. And the thing that's made the difference, I think, in everyone's potential flourishing is having an intuitive edge. So what's the intuitive edge in making decisions that are too big for the mind? So when is a decision too big for the mind? It's too big for the mind when your history is going to get caught up in making the decision. There's a lot of emotional triggers. You're confused. So if you've got a decision right now, and it's one of the three you picked, where you have been mulling this around, feeling it, and you cannot get a consistent yes or no, or left or right, or whatever the decision requires, it's all good. This is why I'm doing this show. I want you to bring that into this process that I'm naming for you now and go, okay, is this too big for my mind? Would my mind kick in my shadow software and my biases and my filters and everything start to kick up and distort perception and distort the data of this choice? If the answer is yes, that decision's too big for your mind. If you've done the grunt work of research, Googling, looking at Yelp reviews, whatever you do, or Amazon reviews, and you finally come to, okay, I got to make a decision, and you're still not clear because you can sense there's another spectrum of data I think is very important to have before I make this decision. That decision's too big for your mind. Here we are. I love the synchronicity of this show because we are, as of Friday, going into a Mercury retrograde, which I did a badass 3.5-hour series on last Sunday. It's available on demand. Go get it. I'm going to give you guys a little sample of it at the end of the show. But the whole cycle itself, the whole cycle of a Mercury retrograde is waking up to an area of your life where there are decisions too big for your mind to make. That is the essence of every Mercury retrograde. That's exactly what it is. In this particular retrograde, it's a lot about your victim getting into stuff and its whole archetypal team and fracking up your data. So wait for the preview. I'll show you, and you'll get a little taste, a little sampler of that and see if it's right for you, that particular series. But my point is that this idea that there are decisions way too big for your mind comes around every 3.5 months in terms of the archetypal cycles of this planet. In other words, every 3.5 months, this spins up in your psyche anyway. So I'd imagine a lot of you are sitting here going, I have a list of decisions that I'm not sure are capable of being made just by my mind alone. Okay, so that's the metric, at least in part, I'll define it even more, of what decisions are too big to make for your mind. Now, if your mind can't make them, what can? Your intuition, your intuitive system. But what's an intuitive system? It is a perceptual system. There are energies and information out there in the holographic field all the time for us to feel. People can be saying one thing and their energy will always tell the truth. I've always said this energy never lies. And so people can say one thing to you, but their energy is going to always tell you the truth. And so will yours, by the way. So you might want to think about that the next time you're about ready to do a little white lying. Is that your energy is going to really be going. But here's the thing. You accessing into your intuitive system isn't just as simple as flipping a switch. Unless you've done, because I'm just thinking I kind of do that. I flip a switch when I go into my mode. But that's the product of 20 years of intuitive readings and a lot of inner shadow work on my behalf. I've always said all intuitives, psychics, mediums, whatever, they're only as clear as the shadow work they've done on themselves. Why? Because even if you are getting information from another source that's not your psyche or your perceptual five senses, i.e. a guide, an energy, a whisper from heaven, you would still distort that information through the same things you distort this information from. It works both ways. Your soul could talk to you, and your shadow would distort the message just as much as your shadow will distort what your eyes see. So I got to put that down as we move to your intuitive system. You will not be able to get to a greater bandwidth of data without doing some shadow work. What is shadow work? It is, first of all, making room for all of you to be here without judgment, because your psyche will not reveal to you what you judge, because when you judge something, you shove it into the shadow. So the more you judge yourself, the less your psyche, the less your intuitive system can reveal to you. So that's the first step of shadow work, is Whatever I see, I'm still worthy. I'm still enough. And it's a paradox when it comes to our esteem system, because most of us don't have enough esteem to see our shadow. It takes a certain quality of esteem to see your dark side. Because if you see your dark side, and shame runs that process, what you see in your dark side is only going to shame you worse, shame you more. But if you see your dark side with genuine soul esteem compassion, meaning whatever I see, it's okay. I'm enough. Now you got somewhere to go. So let's thread this just briefly back to decisions. When you're making a decision, when you're considering optimal decisions, there is your intuitive system that can help you, but it will be compromised based on the lack of, let's say, compassionate dragon hugging you've done for yourself. The cobwebs you've cleared out of your psyche. The dragons you've neutralized with love that no longer breathe fire. It's important, it's so important to take in. Now, what do you do if that's the case? What if you were to say, look, I hear you, Ohotto, you know what? I got a big decision to make. The truth is, my shadow is so active right now that I admit it. I can't even go near my intuitive system. Anything it's going to tell me is going to get distorted through my fear, my insecurity, my different ways of perceiving through trauma. I got true story, not happening. Then what do I say to you? I say, look, all right, this is where we double down on a soul prayer, and this is where you turn this over to a higher power, your guides, your angels. I don't really care how you talk about these forces that are very real, that are there to help you make decisions. This is where you say, look, I'm too contaminated, wounded, tired, angry, depressed to make a decision. I'm giving it to you all. And to that, I would say, well done. Now, when you do that, when you say to heaven or to the energetic world, I'm giving you this decision, take it. You're not idle after that. Oh, no. Because you still got a choice to make, part one. At some point, sometimes the divine will make a choice for you, but you still got a choice to make even then, to align to the choice made for you. So whether it's aligning to the choice made for you or you getting information at some point that can finally get through to you through your intuitive system, that does, yes, indeed, give you what you need to make a decision. You still are responsible for your karma. And what I would say to this is, when it comes to your intuitive field, how do you roll with this? Start to feel things out. So let's bring your big choice in. I want your big one. Give me the big one. I'm probably completely blushing right now. I want the stakes to be high. So give me the one with the high stakes. Let's bring that in. And let's think about, all right, you've been feeling through this decision. You're not clear. A consistent yes or no, right, left, zigzag has not shaken out yet. All right, cool. Let's start here. So we're going to get your pens and paper out. I'm giving you directives on this decision. And you're still going to go through your own intuitive system in the process of making it. We're going to invoke a little higher power juju up in here too. But I want you to bring that decision here. And then I want you to say, okay, I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know how to make this decision. But I am willing to activate my intuitive system. I realize this is too big for my mind. And let's go into your intuitive system. Knowing that you've got a shadow and you might have some distorted perceptual things going on here as far as intuitive guidance getting through to you. All good. We're going to start anyway. You do it anyway, folks. Because this is going to help you shape the soul prayer that you may need. And also, you might clear out some things and get the data yourself intuitively. So we're going in. And I think it's probably best if I do use like some kind of example. So I'm going to use dating somebody as an example. So, and what I want you to do is track with this with your own decision and extrapolate pieces out, and I'll try to riff around a bit. You're dating someone, been dating them for a while. It's time to maybe transition into a more committed thing. It just feels like the natural progression. You're not sure if you should or shouldn't. You're still in that iffy phase of getting to know somebody. And you're aware, okay, I can't make this decision with my mind because I'm so emotionally wound up, triggered. There's just things in this that kind of, I know, distort perception. First step, just tell yourself the truth about that. You will do yourself such a solid, and then you'll get traction and clarity that way. Tell yourself where you're not clear and why, and don't make a cover story for it. Own it. That's how you get to clarity. Now, I would even say I would shy away from intuitive tools like oracle decks and maybe even astrology tarot cards per se, because you're likely to use those in a distorted fashion. You won't get the clear read if you're, let's say, codependent's doing the reading, or if your abandoned child, or whatever part of you is actually the one activated and perceiving right now, and primarily for you in this particular decision. So I want you to do that. I want you to locate in this big, huge, high stakes decision the archetypes perceiving and getting the data to make it in the first place. What parts of you give, and if you don't know what archetype is, it's very simple. Look at a pattern, give it a name. I'll give you one that might be in your decision-making process. How about the perfectionist? How many of you are afraid to make a decision because you don't want to F anything up and you are trying to maintain this illusion of perfection and you're not willing to be experimental, which is a complete polar opposite pattern than the perfectionist. The experiment's happy to blow up the laboratory to get to the formula. The perfectionist wants the perfect formula, the perfect decision right now, right away. If that is part of your decision-making process right now, note that well and know that that part of you cannot generate useful information for you in this decision. Decisions aren't about perfection or right or wrong. They're about optimal growth and potential. That's it. They're not about getting to worth. They're about coming from worth or unveiling worth if you don't see it already. All right? Your perfectionist is going to have a completely different agenda. And we all bring I can't help it, I bring my perfectionist to my decisions as well. And I think that it doesn't quite help. That's where you start to spin around. How many times have you had a decision and it has spun in your head like a tilt-a-whirl, and you burn up all this mental energy only to kind of fall down exhausted at the end of the day with no clarity? I want to tell you that when you're in that mental mind spin, you will not get useful data. How many times has it ever generated useful information for you? It doesn't. So just name it. Like, okay, I'm in the spin, and this will not give me useful information. I'm just going to make a note of that. Oh, and my perfectionist is spinning the wheel. Yeah, and I'm about ready. I'm getting nauseous. I'm spinning around like at Elitch's. That's what we have here in Colorado, Denver, this amusement park. I'm spinning around in the tilt-a-whirl or the roller coaster. And so what I do when that happens, I just go, okay, you can keep spinning. It's not about trying to force yourself to stop doing something that will only make you spend more anyway, because it's probably your perfectionist trying to stop that too. Just go, okay, it's okay, I'm spinning, but I also want to acknowledge I'm not going to get useful information. Great. Now let's continue this movement toward your intuitive system. Now I want you, in this decision, you name the ways the parts of you that you're perceiving it through. Do a whole inventory at who's at the round table of choice. No one's made wrong. Everyone gets to be here, but we want to know what parts of you are saying what and how they're informing the choice-making process overall. And then from here, this is where you start to tune into your heart and your soul. Drop out of your head, drop out of the tilt-a-whirl, drop out of the roller coaster, down into everything. And if you want to somatize this with your body, I would give you an image of drop into your feet, drop into your butt, drop into your thighs, your hips, your stomach, your back, your heart, your arms, your hands. Drop your sensory perceptual perspective out of your head, out of it. And don't give me this kumbaya, meditate, get higher crap either. That's just another mentalized spin up. Get in the grit. The grit is where you're going to get intuitive information. Now, I do want you to do your due diligence and ground level research on this choice. Evaluate, get your detective, get your researcher activated. This is just let your mind go with that for a bit. Okay, cool. I'm doing research, getting the data. And then you pull it back and you go, okay, but you know what? I need something else here. I need the intuitive. I need the mystic. I need the mystic up in here. I need the seeker. You start to go to these inner forces. And what you're doing, let me tell you what you're really doing. When you connect to these interior forces, your intuitive system is now connecting to the grid, the holographic grid of data that this mind cannot see. And what you do is it's like when I do a reading, you just start to feel yourself tuning in to the parts of you that can see in this realm. And you keep one eye on your shadow the whole time. But I want you to image going into your intuitive nature, your energy senses. And if we come into those senses, here's what they all have in common. They give direct information. They don't give stories of information or cover stories no, it's just a direct experience of data. So if I were to look at some of the world leaders that if we've tuned into them and their energy, and if I asked you, do you think this is a kind person? How do you feel that? And for many of them, you go, they're not kind at all. They're angry, they're vindictive, they don't have any kindness at all. There's no story. It's an experience of something like, is that a kind person? Fundamentally, you meet people all the time and you read them. Your energy senses track them all the time. You just don't listen. What would block you? Your biases. In this case of politics these days, it's your political tribalism that doesn't let you see anything. So translate that to how you make decisions. Do your energy senses get out the gate? What puts them back in the closet? And yet you wonder why you can't get clarity on a life-changing decision that's sitting right in front of you. Move into the energy of it. Once again, energy does not lie. So you drop into your energy senses, and I would recommend that you do that through the archetypes that live in the realm of energy. The intuitive is one of them. Being psychic, which is more your psyche can feel fields of energy. Feel it. It's not crystal balls and all that kind of jazz. It's no, I can feel your field in mine. I'm psychic. I am empathic. I'm getting information. So part of your energy senses is your emotional system. Your intuitive emotional system. So if you're someone who has a hard time with your feelings, you just shut down a lot of bandwidth. Here's what I'm after here. That's why I can say it. In choices too big for the mind, you have to feel into the choices. You have to feel them. And what I do when I've got a big decision, of course, is do everything I've told you already. And when it comes to my intuitive system, I feel it out. And I wait for consistent data to arrive. If it's not consistent, I know some part of my triggering or psyche is probably activated, and I got to wait for that to neutralize. So then I get curious about, well, what's activated in me? Why am I unclear? Sometimes, folks, I got to put this in here as well. This is one of the questions you want to ask first. Is this the right time to make this decision and you ask that question in context to the greater grid of what's happening in the world that you cannot ever see completely. That's where you go through soul prayer. You go, hey, heaven, is this even the right time to make this decision? Before I try to make it, let me ask about timing. And heaven might say, actually, no, you need 3 more months before this decision is ready to pop. So in the meantime, you're not idle. Keep gathering information, working on your interior, getting what clarity you can, but it isn't the right time to pull back the arrow and shoot. It's not the right time. Let me say that another way so you hear it in 2 ways. There are some things you're not meant to know. So if there's something you're not meant to know yet in regards to a decision, how can you make the decision? When it comes to Mercury retrogrades and the superstition everyone always puts out there about making decisions and don't make decisions during Mercury retrograde, it's a superstition based in fact. The fact of it is that if Mercury retrogrades are about getting more holographic information than our usual ego mind can get and perceive, then wouldn't you want to hold off on making a decision until all that information was finally kind of availed to you? And then to get more specific, that's specific to the retrograde itself and the activated archetypes. Other areas of your life are fine to make choices. But this one, where those archetypes are doing their dance, activating up and asking for shift and pivot to new power, no, wait it out. So there's no declarative, like, never make any decisions during Mercury retrograde. That's ridiculous. You have to go, and how do you know? You go into your intuitive system. You go, how does it feel for me to make that decision? Now, let me give you some pointers on the feeling part of this. Do I feel, if I make this decision this way, to the left, that I lose power? You know exactly what it feels like to lose power. If I make a decision to the right here, do I feel like I lose power there? Start with tracking power loss. I feel disempowered when I make that decision. I feel empowered. That feels opening. That feels like I'm getting vitalized by that decision. You know, a lot of times in breakups, that's what we have to do. We have to go, okay, if I leave this relationship because we've hit the dark night and I don't know where to go from here. If I leave, how does that feel? Oh, you know what? It feels freeing, but also heartbreaking and soul-crushing, but it feels vitalizing. It feels like a new beginning. It feels like I get to grow into the next level of my potential if I leave. Well, you don't need an intuitive to tell you leave. But then you'll go to your head, well, should I, shouldn't I? Really? Now, if I leave, let's reverse it. If I leave this relationship, oh no, I feel like I had more growth to do with this person. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't quite feel like it's the right time or the right reason. I maybe can't even language with my mind why, but I just know that that's not the right decision. And that's actually going to be a hard path. We got some shit to work out. This is not no easy thing. This is not going to be easy. But I just know it's the right one. This is what I mean by dropping into your decision. Now, I want to riff around here and say that we've kind of talked about what choices your mind can make, the pedestrian daily ones, the choices your mind can't make. And now let's look at another angle here. And then I'm going to start to shut this down. What choices could your mind make if you developed a way to inform your mind with your intuitive energy senses? What we all tend to do a lot of the time in big decisions sometimes is that you all know you have this energy intuitive system and energies and spiritual forces around you helping you on your destiny, helping on your path of destiny. You know that. You don't come to my classroom without not knowing that. So you know that. So I imagine a lot of you, when you get to these big decisions, that you feel like your intuition can't quite rein in, and your mind certainly can't. You will abdicate choice to the divine. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm saying that's just what you do. And I think that's useful if you've gotten to a point where you're honest with yourself and you're like, look, I need a divine intervention, a divine synchronicity, because I'm a mess. I'm a scrambled egg. Yeah, okay. But I also want to add in, if you begin to really do what I'm talking about, this inner intuitive expansion with yourself, there comes a time where that's less and less. You know exactly what to do. You don't have to even say one soul prayer. Your energy senses go out, your shadow's in check, you have brought your wounds into present time and melted the trauma out of your history. You're on point. You're razor sharp. You're clear. You know your values are soul infused, not culturally conditioned exclusively. You know because the values you harbor connect you to you. And the choices you make from them connect you to you. And then you're clear. So it's a tough scrambled egg day when you've got to just say to Jesus, take the wheel. And my point is, there are decisions that might be in some kind of gradient in your life that with a little more intuitive development, shadow work, compassion, self-love, and soul esteem, you could make yourself. Now, that said, let's go back to the big guns here. And choice as it enters the holographic karmic field of life. You'll, at the same time, always be consulting, and I encourage this, greater counsel from someone like me. Or if you have wiring for it, your own guidance team. Or both. Because what we can do is we can see, in context to your decisions, the greater karmic play at hand. Now, I can never take someone's lessons from them. There's information I'm not even privy to in an intuitive reading with somebody. But I can see a lot more than they can in their crazy scrambled egg state. And I can see where patterns go and the bigger karmic tectonics of patterns and where they're headed. I can usually get a good coordinate on that stuff. It's one of my gills. I'm like a fish. I can swim in the water. That's kind of interesting. It's one of my skills. You may not have that skill. So I just want to say, you always want to also kind of touch into where's the greater karmic fabric of things here. If I could go out bigger, you got to have one foot in present time. But if you were to futurize a little and sort of forecast into the greater grid of choice, what's the karmic full circle of this choice? You do want to get into that as much as you're able. But at the same time, I'll tell you, if you're present and reading your system adequately, inherent in that data is that data. Is that data. So this is the question of what choices could your mind make comes down to how informed is your mind and what's it informed by. The more informed it is by your intuitive voice, by your energy senses, and by perhaps the help of someone like me or other people with various intuitive skill sets, the better. And yeah, man, you're on it. You can make that decision. So I want you to revisit now all your choices that you brought to this show. Go through them and do this work I've presented to you and see what shakes out for you. And I'd love to hear from you. My Facebook public page is a great place to post comments and questions. And I just want to sort of tell you what's ahead with this show. We're going to do a show in 2 weeks, and this next show is going to be, speaking of intuition, I'll be doing live intuitive readings. If you want to do that with me, there are some caveats and protocols that have to be in place for you to come on camera with me, and I'm only taking people that are willing to come on camera. So if you're willing to show your face and get a reading with me about whatever topic I come up with, I haven't developed the topic for the show yet. I'll be releasing that shortly. Register for the show on Crowdcast. You have to be registered there to come on air. And list your question in the question section for that particular show. And we'll do this. I can't wait to do readings. I haven't done them for a little while, and I'm excited about it. I can't wait to help you all. And what will happen on these shows, by the way, even if you're not chosen, is I'll do a reading on someone else, and you'll think it's for you, because it'll resonate so synchronistically well for you that the advice I give someone as I read whatever their situation is going to speak to maybe something in your life situation as well. So what I'm going to do in these shows is I'll pick a topic that I think the next one will be on relationships, hint, hint. But I'll pick a topic, and then if you have a question under the umbrella of that topic, bring it. Bring it. Closing down the show, though, a couple things I want to recap here. There are choices too big for your mind. Evaluate them. Know what they are. Part 2, know your human psyche and love it with all you got. And hug those dragons in. Admit when you're too scrambled to get information intuitively. Admit when you're too biased to see, even with your ego mind, the broader spectrum and bandwidth that might help you make a decision. Ask if it's the right time to make a decision. Maybe it's not, because there's more information to come. If you're still confused, wait until you get a consistent response in your system. So wait and go, wow, I don't have all the data. I'm still turning around. When you're in the mental spin, know that there's nothing useful there, nothing at all. Drop out down into your energy senses through your body and surrender to higher forces that love you, are guiding you all the time, and say, speak to me. But then you got to listen. You got to listen. And ask them to speak to you in a way you can hear. In compassion to your shadow territory, your biases, your traumas, your fears, your anxieties. Then push into your energy senses even more. Expand into this. Intuition's a skill of the soul, and that's the main way I approach it, is that it's a soulful skill, meaning I'm seeing things in intuitive readings from a very vast or different level. Yet I also have one foot on the earth. I think that's what I'm known for, is being very pragmatic and practical with my advice, because what use is advice if you can't, use it to empower your co-creative journey here. But use your own senses. Apprentice this. It took me a long time to get as good as I am, and I still keep getting better. So know it's like a muscle. You got to kind of build it. And there's many facets to it. I'm sure I'll do an online course on this, intuitive, holographic intuition 2.0 at some point. But feel into your decisions. If there's nothing consistent, wait it out. I really do that. I don't make decisions until I know for sure. And when you know for sure, admit it. Do the imaging I gave you of someone leaving a relationship. Use that for any decision. Do you lose power? Does this feel like you get power? And I don't mean power is not about controlling anyone, or power is about vitalizing self-connection. Do you feel more self-connected in this decision, even though it might really be a heartbreak? Both can be true. It also a lot of people might not like that decision. Or do you feel power loss, self-disconnection, because maybe you are too busy worried about other people and their opinions, or maybe because it's just not the optimal decision for you, or maybe not right now. Decisions are very interesting. They're still holographic, and ultimately they're best made intuitively. Unless it's a pedestrian day-to-day thing. So here we are, heading to a Mercury retrograde. I want to show you guys a little sample of the series I just did. So I'm going to play that for you now, and then I'll come back and we'll close up the show. Feel free to leave comments. I'm going to look at the questions while this is playing and see if there's anything I can answer real quick. And just check this out, because this might really speak to you. This is about the victim, the alchemist, and God moving from wounds to power. So I did about an hour on the Mercury retrograde, then I taught a process for 2 hours that was badass amazing on how to move from your victim archetypal crew to your co-creator power crew of archetypes, and the transition team in the middle of archetypes that gets you there. So check it out. I hope you like it. Hey everybody, it's Robert Ohotto. So welcome to this Mercury retrograde in Scorpio Sagittarius webcast event. I couldn't be more excited to share with you all of the insights I've amassed and the archetypes I've mapped that are going to be activated, as well as the primary process I would guide you to engage during this retrograde phase. I think it's going to open up so much incredible potential for you in your life, and I have incredible insights ready to deliver and to guide you with throughout this whole time. What is holocampus astrology? It's a term I coined and created to differentiate my work with astrology from other astrologers. Nothing against other astrologers, but I will say that what I do with astrology as an intuitive tool is use it to understand soul contracts, potential, destiny, timing, archetypal activations, and something we all live in, which is energetic archetypal cycles as they unfold through time. Holocampus astrology is an astrology for the co-creator, not the victim, which is ironic because we're talking a lot about that archetype today, the victim archetype. But it is about how do you meet the psychic weather that you really cannot control. It's already been doing its thing before any of us were born. It'll keep doing its thing when we're gone. But it is part of the, let's say, creative matrix here on planet Earth that we have archetypal energetic cycles. So what astrology offers us, if we use it in an intuitive way, in an archetypal way, is, okay, what's the weather? When we get our weather forecast, what do we do? Oh, it's going to snow tomorrow. Maybe I want to stay in. Maybe I want to, make sure that I've got warm clothes ready. Maybe I want to go skiing or snowboarding. Hello. You start to use the weather forecast as a way to kind of direct choice and anticipate and position yourself in what's going on in your environment. And I could say that astrology is very much the same, but it also points to inner weather. So when Mercury retrograde happens, it's as if Mercury, per our perspective, stands still in the sky and then starts to go backward. It's not really, but it just appears that way. However, it still means something if we're going to look through the law of synchronicity. It means something's going backward in ourselves. Something is going down into the shadow. Something's being pulled into the unconscious. Now, let me bring in a little mythology and archetypal flavor here, because what Hermes, Mercury, was the messenger of the gods. That was his role. And Mercury, as an archetypal force in the world and in you, is also the messenger of the inner and outer gods. Now, what I mean by inner and outer gods, I mean inner archetypal forces inside of you, your archetypal team, parts of your soul contract, sacred contract. I also mean that Mercury is the messenger on behalf of the larger, currently activated archetypal cycles in play. So when we go through any Mercury retrograde, it's not just the fact that it's retrograde in a particular sign or signs, as the case may be this time. It's also that the message Mercury has is on behalf of the holographic archetypal grid itself and all of its activations. The voice, it comes through the message itself, the territory of the message, the way it funnels is through the sign or signs that Mercury is retrograde in. This Mercury retrograde, as are all retrograde cycles, is a chaos cycle. This particular chaos cycle, if I distill it down into maybe one or two things, it is a chaos cycle of empowerment through truth. So welcome to the victim, the alchemist, and God, moving from wounds to power. I think before we begin the alchemical work of moving you from wounds to power, getting you to a deep understanding of your victim archetype, of your victim consciousness, I've got to lay down some key terms for us all to work from so that we can get into this alchemical opus and then make this journey and pivot and shift from wounds to power, baby. So what is powerlessness? Have you ever actually thought of that? What is powerlessness? Briefly, just take a minute with yourself and your system and feel into, wow, where am I powerless and to what am I powerless to? To the things where maybe you could have power, but you don't right now. We could have power if we started to activate a new archetypal crew inside of us to handle certain situations in life instead of the ones we're using now, instead of that old ass, powerless, victim-based crew. Now that I've got you into what is powerlessness, what is power? That's the natural next question. What is power? What does it mean to self-connect? Let's define that, because with empowerment, with power comes self-connection. You can be self-connected and have a very conscious rapport with your own shadow side. You can be in a conscious state of rapport with your wounding and still remain self-connected. What about your intuitive system and self-connection? This is just to get you very familiar with the language of your own power system. I'm going to introduce here something that's important because it's part of the alchemy, and that is a concept that I mapped in my intuitive work when it comes to archetypes in people as it relates to trauma and just surviving life. Each of us, our psyche, our subconscious, adapts certain patterns, strategies, i.e. archetypes, to aid our survival, and that is in relationship to the experiences we have had as children and just generally in life. And one of those experiences that we've all had as children or just generally in life is we have all been victimized. In relationship to your victimization, your psyche adapted what I call survival archetypes of adaptation. Survival archetypes of adaptation are just that. It's a way you've adapted to survive any situation for any reason. And it's oftentimes led unconsciously by the subconscious mind in your psyche. One of the adaptations to that I've seen in readings is becoming an invisible child. So for example, if you were growing up in an abusive home, let's just say verbally abusive, where people were shamed, called names. You had maybe a very wicked queen mother who did not like anyone outshining her. So she made it a point to find ways to verbally abuse and gut you out. One of the adaptations to that I've seen in readings is becoming an invisible child. I'm going to disappear. I'm going to blend in and vanish. So I'm no longer a target. And I'm no longer competition with my mother's low esteem and her wicked queen archetype. Then that survival adaptation translates itself right into adult living, and you wonder why no one sees you, your spouse doesn't see you, you never get your needs met, etc., etc. You can't get traction in your dreams. You feel disconnected from community. You're not visible. So this process I'm guiding you through right now is about the other options. It's also about identifying and getting very, very, very conscious of the victim crew inside of you that's already running it all, and how it does it, the archetypes involved, and not to make and judge it and, get your sword out and try to cut it down. That paradoxically feeds into it instead of neutralizing it and letting yourself move on to something else. No, this is about going, okay, I bow before you, victim crew. I want to survive without you, but it's not working out so well now. You know why? Because over time, what I did was I made my victimization my identity. There's a power in that, I learned, but it's collapsing me now. And that's a power that costs way too much, and it's not sustainable. Archetypes of destiny. Let's talk about that. That's just a little preview of archetypes of adaptation. They're genius. I mean, we could go through. One of them is the victim. One of them is the victim. I've said invisible child, but let's keep it on track with the alchemy at hand. Your victim is that part of you that went through victim experiences or inherited a victim pattern from family lineage or cultural lineage. And in a shadow way, it became a great part of your identity. And as we get into it soon, you're going to discover it also became a great part of your esteem system. You have a victim esteem system. And if you want out of victim consciousness, of the victim creating and its crew creating your life, you've definitely got to understand the victim esteem system and how it operates in you. And you've got to replace it with something else, or you're not going anywhere. Beyond archetypes, survival archetypes of adaptation, there are other options. And that's where I will introduce you now to what I call archetypes of destiny. All right, until next time, namaste and lots of love. Hey everybody, hope you enjoyed that little sample. If you're interested in transforming your victim consciousness, your victim archetype, and through the Alchemist and the whole this awesome crew I've got mapped out for you into power, check it out. You can go to my website, ohotto.com, ohotto.com. Also, while you're there, you might want to sign up for my newsletter. That's the best way to stay informed about these shows, because we're going to keep letting you know when they're coming out. And I've got one coming out on the 28th of November. That's the next one. That's the one I'll be doing live intuitive readings on, and probably focusing something around relationships at that time. So thank you so much for joining me this evening. And if there's anyone else you feel that would be helped by this content, please be sure to share that with them. I will see you in 2 weeks when we boot up our next show, or you might just see me on my Mercury retrograde in Scorpio Sagittarius series, if you get it. That starts, by the way, this Friday, the retrograde itself, and it goes through until December 6th. So highly recommend you get it. Really good stuff. This has been a lot of fun. It's so good to be back in front of the camera and reaching out and talking to all of you. I will look forward to seeing your comments on my Facebook public page or in Crowdcast here. And I'll see you guys next time in 2 weeks. Have an amazing, amazing night. Namaste. Night.